Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of AI Dev Tools. And today we are talking about how Gen AI and vibe coding is transforming software engineering. Akhilesh, he is a software engineer. Hi Akhilesh, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, hi Simon. Yeah, thank you for the warm introduction.
Now we're very excited about vibe coding and Gen AI, right? Everybody's talking about it, so I bet me and everyone else, they're very excited on what are we going to cover in this episode.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. So this is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and I'm looking forward to it. So we can get started. So I just wanted to set the stage in terms of like what is vibe coding, right? So this is a term that has been coined by Andrew Karpathy. He's like a pioneer in AI who headed like Tesla's AI division, the self-driving and all that. Even before that, he had a lot of patents, a lot of papers published in like AI and all that. So what he told is like, hey, I don't want to look at the syntax, semantics, and all that. I just wanted to say, hey, this is what I want to achieve in natural language, right? Like English is the most common language that everyone uses. So can I do that? And what tools are there that can achieve that, right? Using generative AI. So imagine like, just to put it in simple terms, right? Imagine like there's a doctor who want to build like some diagnostic tool during their lunch break, or like a teacher who want to create like an adaptive learning system without writing like a single line of code, right? And also like startup founders who are like not very technical. So normally what they do is they try to find a technical co-founder, but let's say they want to create like a vision or a prototype, right? To see the feasibility, does it work, to get an initial feedback from the users and see if I want to go fully in on that, things like that, right? So earlier you had to hire like a full-fledged team to do that for you, like a lot of time, resources, money in the order of like tens of thousands of dollars. So this, setting this context, right, like this is what I wanted to talk about, like in this presentation. What are the tools available, like what are we seeing with respect to that in the industry, what sort of advantages, what are the challenges, and all that. So without further ado, I will get started. uh, in terms of the agenda, we have a packed agenda today. So one is that we'll start by understanding the revolutionary shift, what Mr. Andrew Karpathy had mentioned as vibe coding. And then we'll dive into the hard data from real organizations across like healthcare, education, finance, and manufacturing. Then we'll examine the technology, which is generative AI or vibe coding, that is making this possible. And we'll also address the elephant in the room, which is like, hey, this is all good, but what are the challenges and the risks associated with that, right? And then finally, what is that roadmap that if you own like an enterprise or like a small or medium business and you want to take this approach, right? What is a roadmap that you can follow, that people have been doing it and have found a lot of success with that, right? And let's get to the next one. So in terms of like programming accessibility, right? So initially, if you remember, if there was a software engineer, they had to go write it in like a terminal, like they had to remember the syntax and semantics, if not Google them or use Stack Overflow to find that information, and then write. And then when IDEs came, it was like a slightly different approach where you had the autocomplete, it remembered the syntax and semantics, you could do like auto formatting, linting, and a bunch of things there. So it made it slightly easier for people. And now what we are talking about is like a complete paradigm shift, which is earlier with the syntax, semantics, and all that, and you had to remember if something went wrong, debug and figure out with your expertise on this programming language and all that. But now what is happening is this low code or no code platforms are trying to democratize this. But till generative AI came into the picture, they sort of hit like a ceiling. So this is the maximum that we'll probably can go. But can we really achieve no code, right? Without writing even like a single line of code, can I build like a full-fledged application end to end? So that's where I think the vibe coding, the term, came into the picture and it got popularized. So let's say, for example, if you are writing like a simple for loop, right? I want to traverse, I want to go through all the list of people that I have in my sheets or some other document. And let's say I want to find the customers who haven't ordered anything for the last 90 days, right? So earlier you had to write like a for loop, traverse to them, complex logic, and all. Now imagine like with vibe coding, you're just saying, hey, this is the list. I want you to go through to the list and figure out who are the customers who didn't order this in the last 90 days, right? And it's as simple as that. So, like I said earlier, this isn't like an incremental improvement. This is like a fundamental redefinition of who can participate in the software creation, right? And let's get to the next slide. So there are some research sort of questions that we have. There are like some critical questions that we sort of to answer, right? Like, what does this do? Like, in terms of like accessibility, we wanted to like quantify, is this really different from previous attempts at democratization? So people have been trying to do that, like make it simpler for people to develop software without like a lot of a lot of expertise in the programming language and all that. Has this really changed so much? And in terms of impact, right, what quantifiable impact can we show? Because at the end of the day, what is the money factor that you can show there, right? Like, what are the measurable benefits that the organizations are seeing? And then let's be honest, right? When somebody develops something there, when everyone develops something, obviously there are things that will break. So what are the challenges there? And finally, the important practical question: how can we do this, or how can we implement something like that without all the chaos? So this is the research that guided like so these are the questions that guided our research across like a lot of organizations and over like 300 projects. And I wanted to start with like some key metrics, right, that we had seen. So if you remember, if you see in the graph there, on the traditional programming aspect, right, like where you had to implement something, you had to write all the code and all that. So there, for non-programmers, right, there was like a 12 only 12% were able to complete the task, like in traditional programming environments, right? Like you had to write all the code and all that, versus like in natural language programming interfaces, like where the tools are available, where you talk in English, interact in English, give feedback in English, and it's able to write the code, do everything, and give you like a working prototype for you, right? So in such scenario, we had seen like a drastical increase where like almost 76% success rate, right, with respect to the projects that somebody had started. And also, let's look at the organizational impact as well, right, which is a key factor for people to adopt or adopt on this new paradigm. So we had seen like a 50% reduction in project completion time, and also like a 62% increase in project success rates. That basically what that means is like only fewer projects are abandoned, right, and more delivered value. And also in terms of like the faster time to market, there's like it has increased by 27%. And for startups, it's even more dramatic, right, like where they're able to launch their products faster in a hyper competitive space, like 22% faster than what they were doing earlier. And think about looking at these stats, right, think about what this means for your organization. Let's get to the next one. And this is like some data that we have compiled across like different domains. So if you look at different industries, like for example, if you notice, the healthcare leads in the task success rate, right, where there is a 76% improvement. Why? I mean, like we were thinking, why is that? Because I think medical professionals are excellent at precise problem description. So they write like a lot of notes even today, and very detailed notes. So that's what I think we are thinking as the probable reason why there is a drastic improvement in healthcare professionals. And also education shows like about 82% novice adoption. That's the highest across all the sectors. I think again, teachers are like natural communicators, like in terms of explaining the concept and all that. So that clearly shows it there. And with finance, we have seen like some moderate gains where it's about like 18% reduction. But if you see in finance also, we have a lot of documents like compliance and a lot of regulatory related documents which are hard to go through, right? Imagine building something like that, which is solving a lot of those problems, right, than manually looking at all that. And if you look at it in a global or a worldwide perspective, where like each state or each city, each country has its own regulations and all that, it makes it even more easier there. And manufacturing might seem lower, but 48% improvement in success rates is revolutionary, right, for shop floor innovation. Because it's this, there are like precise processes and precise things that are set up in like manufacturing, and unless they see a lot of value with a lot of metrics, they don't, it's not gonna change, because that's gonna that's going to make the entire end-to-end process a lot more troublesome. So the key insight from this slide that I wanted you to take is like the pattern is clear, right? That the domain experts can now directly translate their expertise into working software. So I wanted to dive into a little bit of real world use cases, right? Like again, healthcare. So let's talk about some person like Dr. Sarah Chen again, who is like a cardiologist at like a different at a medical facility, and she always has she observed some persistent problems with her team, right? Where she noticed her team spent about like 15 minutes per patient on risk assessment calculations, and she tried to get their IT department to build a tool, and they said like there's a 6-month backlog. So and what she did was she learned about vibe coding, and during like one afternoon during her lunch break, she built like a risk assessment application, right? Like I mean, like it doesn't need to be like a full-fledged one, but she built something like a prototype, and then she described the medical logic in like plain English, and AI generated the complete code. And the result of this thing is that earlier the team was spending like 15 minutes per patient, and that reduced to like 3 minutes per patient now with the AI app. And that's about like 12 minutes you are saving per patient. And if you're taking on an average 20 patients per day, that's like 4 hours of clinical time recovered daily. And the broader impact is that it included like 47 healthcare providers, and 92% created like functional applications that they're actually using it in their hospitals or clinics in like day-to-day jobs. And there's also like a 23% improvement in diagnostic accuracy when these custom AI based tools are deployed, and also like 85% reduction in time from needing to have a solution, right? Like a final solution for that. So what do we take what is the key takeaway from that is that when domain experts are directly able to implement their ideas, right, without like a lot of middlemen or like someone else doing that job for you, the innovation accelerates exponentially. And let's get into a few other domains, right? Like I think we can start with education, where there is like adaptive learning, right? So we noticed that 82% of the teachers who had like zero coding experience, like have not even looked at line of code earlier, were able to successfully build like education labs that were helping teachers and also like the students in terms of the learning. And there's like a 3.2x increase in customized content, so every class was able to have like tailored tools that were specific to like a language or specific to like a program that they had for students. And there was an example where one teacher created an app detecting dyslexia patterns in student writing, something would have taken like all at least 50,000 US dollars, right, to develop traditionally with a team, and it would have taken like a few months at least to develop. And in terms of finance, there's like about 2.3 million average annual savings per organization that we have noticed. And quarterly reports that used to take 3 weeks were taken now with 4 days. And also in terms of the compliance, officers building their own audit tools, 52% project success rate has been noticed. And in manufacturing, quality control engineer built defect detection system using like just phone cameras that are available with everyone, right? And he noticed like a 312% ROI within just the first year, right? And that's just like a conservative estimate. So the floor supervisors are able to create their own custom workflow apps in hours, right? Not even like months. And getting to the next one, the startup ecosystem transformation, right? So if there's anyone who had worked in like a startup kind of environment, they would notice that it's a lot of hard to find your first employees, right? Like who can code, finding your technical co-founders, co-founder engineers and all that, and implementing that, and spending a lot of money to create the initial prototype, to even get it evaluated, right? Like to try it out, do beta testing with your users and figure out does it work, or do I need to pivot and find something else, right? So one interesting statistic that we have noticed is Y Combinator is like a very popular startup accelerator in the United States. And the winter 2025 cohort data is staggering, right? Like 25% of the startups that are there in that particular cohort have code bases that are 95% AI generated, right? Let that sink in for a couple of seconds, right? And what this means, right? Like non-technical founders are able to build the MVPs themselves. And there's a 67% reduction in initial technical hiring. Validate your idea first and then hire later, right? And there's 3x more iterations during discovery. So you're able to fail fast, if needed, pivot and succeed more faster, right? And earlier there used to be the technical co-founder shortage. Like now with vibe coding, you don't even need that for the MVP. So what we are seeing is a paradigm shift where we are witnessing the democratization of the complete entrepreneurship itself. And what are like some of the technical foundations that are enabling democratization? And I think everyone would have heard about like ChatGPT, Gemini, and other models there, Anthropic, and all that. So these are the large language models. And in large language models, so like what is that is making it much more easier to develop or has given like a lot of better accuracy, right, when you're using large language models, is these models are trained like on a large set of existing code, right, like well written code, open source code bases and all that. And they understand code just like how they understand natural language, right? And they've seen like millions of code patterns, and they know what works, what doesn't work, what is like a good pattern and all that. And they also have like type system which prevents errors before they can even happen. And the natural language magic that's happening there is like you're able to express, right, you're able to express in a more formal or like a casual way. You don't need to describe it in the terms of like a programming language anymore. Like as we discussed earlier, you can just say, hey, find me the customers that haven't ordered anything for the last 90 days, right? It's as simple as that. And you're able to get this real-time feedback, right, like where you give it an expression, or we call it as prompt. And it is able to generate something in real time and show it to you in real time as well, like, hey, this is how it's going to look like, your user interfaces UI is going to look like, or your web app is going to look like, or your mobile app is going to look like this. And you can look at it, hey, maybe can you maybe make this color blue, or can you make this red? It's as simple as describing that, right? Rather than trying to figure out what color, how do I change in JavaScript, or how do I change in like some React or some other framework. So, and because of all this, there is like a rapid refinement, right, because of the feedback and all that. So you're able to refine your approach. You're able to figure out like what looks good, what do you like, hey, maybe this button has to be there, just add this new menu item or things like that. And we did also talk about like a few tools. Again, this list is not very exhaustive, and there are like new applications or like new tools that are coming available every day. So we just picked a few that we have noticed are being used a lot by the end users. So Cursor recently had hit like $1 billion valuation, right? Like, and it is like the fastest growing startup in like Europe. Sorry, not Cursor. It's Lovable is the fastest growing startup in Europe, and they had hit like $1 billion valuation in like this year, right? And they were able to achieve the 100 million ARR in like just 8 months, which is like the fastest that they have seen any startups in like Europe. And similar thing with Cursor, like Cursor and Windsurf are some things that are being used by a lot of developers as well to get their ideas faster, to develop their applications faster, or to debug issues and all that. So they were also able to achieve like significant results, right? Like 83% preferred them during the trials, sorry. And Windsurf is able to say, hey, I'm generating like 70 million AI generated lines of code, right? And I have about like 1 million active users. And Lovable has about like 2.3 million active users. And Replit has like 75% no code usage, right, by users. So what all of these tools are doing is like they're providing avenues for anyone, right? The I think the only roadblock is like your thought process, like how far can you think, from someone who has to go and sit and figure out like how do I code this thing. From that, you are saying like, I'm going to manage like these tools. I'm going to say, hey, I want to achieve this, or I want to build something like this, and I want you to use these things for me to build it, and it's able to do that magic for you in the backend, right? And let's get to the next one. So this is like some platforms that we have, right? Like the first one is basically the cursor agent, and then the second one is Replit, and this one is Lovable, right? Like what I did was I just gave some simple prompt, right? Like I want you to build like an AI based scraper because I want to get some information or scrape some information from the internet, and I want to do some analysis on that, right? Store it. So it's able to just build that for me there. And let's get to the problems or the challenges that we have today, right? Like when everyone is developing, obviously there is a concern about like code quality, right? And people are able to get like, so the in terms of like the code quality, there is like a 28% higher complexities. A lot of times what happens is AI over engineers than what you actually need, right? And unless you explicitly point it out, it says it duplicates a lot of the code, and it doesn't always see like the bigger picture, right? Bigger picture of the complete app. And as and when the code base starts growing, like you start adding more features and all that, it starts getting a lot more confused, right? So you have to precisely give instructions in terms of like, hey, I know this is here, I want you to reuse parts of it and things like that in the prompt. And also the refactoring done after it's like 6 months, there's like a lot of technical debt that accumulates. And also for the security, right? So in terms of like the security vulnerabilities, that's like a nightmare scenario, right? People are accidentally leaking their API keys, and people are able to use scrape those API keys and use it for their apps, build them in like thousands of dollars, right? Or tens of thousands of dollars. And we have noticed that at least 67% of the apps that are vibe coded have like at least one OWASP's top 10 vulnerability, right? And 83% of them have like injection vulnerabilities, and on an average about 4.2 critical vulnerabilities per application, right? But here's the thing, I mean, like there are obviously challenges, but these are solvable problems. So we can go with automated security scanning, code review processes, architectural governance. We know how to do this, right? The question is, how will we do that? Like, will we even do that, right? We need to put this as like a guardrail sort of thing, where once we develop an app and we're trying to put it into production, we want to um, make this all this kind of checks to ensure that we don't hit any of these problems. So I think the call to action here is like, don't let perfect be the enemy of transformative, right? And getting to the other sort of challenges, which is around sustainability and maintenance. So there is an uncomfortable truth here, right? Where once an AI generated app, about like 37% of these apps are abandoned, right? Like somebody just develops them, says, hey, this is nice, and then just forgets about it, right? There's nothing happening around that. Versus like 12%, just 12% for like traditional development. And we wanted to figure out like why, right? Like I think it's all once somebody gets to like a working state, like basically spending effort on that, time on that, and making sure you are able to get it into production and like have find a fit for your users and work on that. And one more interesting thing that we have noticed is a lot of these apps were built to solve like personal problems. Let's say in my day-to-day job, or it doesn't have to be a job, right? It can be in your personal life as well. You have noticed some sort of problem, like with your kids, you wanted to track something around like, hey, what are the chores that are given to them, are they all finishing that, things like that. So somebody developed an app for that, and that became like a good one that people wanted to use, right? All parents wanted to use because they saw a similar sort of problem. So a lot of those apps are like that, where somebody created something for their own personal problem, and then it gained traction and became something big. And going to the other maintenance crisis, right? Like once the original creator, whoever did that application, leaves, it takes like 3.8x longer to fix any sort of issues. And 52% of the organizations struggle with onboarding AI to code bases. And documentation, you have to explicitly ask it, saying like, hey, properly document this thing. If not, it doesn't bother, right? And then at the end of the day, it's hard to figure out what is happening where in the code. And what is the solution path to all this, right? You make it mandatory to generate the documentation along with the code, and also start with like test driven development, where you ask it to create tests for what is that feature or what is that functionality you want to develop, and then develop the feature based on the tests, right? So you have like a perfect way it's supposed to work, and then the code is also written in such the AI will write the code in such a way that it will work. And also have like knowledge management systems in terms of like where to look, what to look, and all that. And succession planning, right, from day one. If somebody is leaving, like what is the plan, how do you want to go about doing that? And the way to look at it is like any AI generated code has to be treated just like any other technical asset, right? And the takeaway from this thing is like the code might be free, like somebody, the AI is writing the code for you, but the maintenance isn't, so you have to take care of that. And an interesting thing that we wanted to talk about is, let's say you want to do this right in your organization or in your company, and what is the playbook that has worked for a lot of companies? So the first one is like you start safe, right, within like months 1 to 3, where you take like pick some internal tools which could be like employee directories or like simple dashboards, and you train a cohort of like citizen developers. So the citizen developers basically means like people who are internal, who have the domain expertise and are able to use AI tools to write code, right? So you train them, and then you see that there's at least like a 50% task completion rate, right? And then learn from this experience of what works for your context, for your particular organization or for particular company, what works and what doesn't work. Take it as a learning and then get to phase two, where the primary goal of this is to build confidence, right? Where from internal tools now we are going into customer facing but non-critical apps. So where you can implement like code reviews, make sure like every new line that gets added gets checked. You are doing the security validation, security checks and all that, and you build your governance frameworks. And the success criteria from this is you want to make sure there's like at least a 65% adoption rate, right? And if that is done, then we can get to phase 3, which is scale strategic, right? Now you want to tackle the business critical applications. You want to look at the excellence model, spread the expertise around like AI tools, how to use them, what is the best approaches, what works, what doesn't work, and all that. And you start integrating that with the existing and development environments, right? And from here you look at it, if there is like a 25% of overall acceleration in the development, right, that's a good success criteria to look at. And just remember that this is like this isn't a rip and replace of your existing thing. It's the way to look at it is like augment your existing development processes and accelerate them even further, right, using AI. And what's the future of the democratized software engineering, right? We want to, so we have talked about like a lot of things. I want to like bring it all together, right, and bring up like the key points. So basically there is a 76% task completion rate for non-programmers, and this is real, right? This is happening today, this is not in the future. And there is a 50% faster development, 62% higher success rates. This is valuable. Yes, there are challenges, but for the benefits they are manageable trade-offs. And implementation requires like structure, but it's achievable with a lot of guardrails, and you being like very detailed in terms of the implementation and following the strategy and roadmap. And what is the future directions that we are looking at, right? Like, so we want to I think in the next couple of years or maybe a little more than that, we will have AI that is going to explain the code generation logic, right? So not just why, sorry, not just what, but it'll also give you why it did something like that. So it's able to explain the code generation process and make sure that that is what is in line with your thought process as well. And they are going to be domain specific models as well. For example, the healthcare AI that notes like HIPAA rules and all that. So this is like a very strong regulation in terms of like the healthcare data, how it can be handled, how it has to be stored, and all that. So in terms of the way to look at it is not something as like hey, these AI tools are going to come and replace the existing developers, right? We look at it as like a hybrid sort of intelligence or hybrid framework where humans and AI are able to work in perfect harmony, achieve greater, like achieve faster, are able to achieve their goals faster. Humans are able to write whatever they want faster or code whatever they want faster and improve on existing applications or improve on existing things faster. So the Gartner, which is like a popular research company, is predicting that this year, like which is 2025, about like 70% of new applications will be built with low or no code. And I just want to reiterate that the future isn't coming; it's already here. So the question isn't whether this transformation will happen; it's whether you lead it or whether you follow it. The tools exist, the evidence is clear, the research backs it up, and the opportunity is yours to pick. So I just want to conclude with some final words, which is software creation is not like an exclusive domain of software engineers right now. It belongs to anyone with an idea, right? And the courage to express it. And I want to welcome you all to the democratized future of software engineering. And good luck with that. Yeah, I think I'm done with the presentation.
Wow, Akhilesh, that was so good. I say, I often don't say it. It was a really honor for me, to sit back behind the scenes and listen to you. It was so good. You talked about not many people, Akhilesh, people talk about code quality, especially when it comes to vibe coding, because everybody is just vibing. They're just writing the prompts. They
Mhm,
don't care what the code is being written. So I love that you talk about code quality. What are the problems that we are facing, and those are solvable problems, right? Those are not new problems that we see.
mhm,
We are into engineering for so long, and I also really loved the implementation strategy. And you divided everything into different phases. Often, when you try to build an application by coding, you think you can just do it in a day. That's what people are saying. Do it in a day. I built it over the weekend. That's not really scalable, right? You need to have
mhm,
different phases of software engineering. So great numbers, great use cases, Akhilesh. I want to ask you, also did share
mhm,
some of the tools, vibe coding tools,
mhm.
WinSub and Cursor and Lovable. Which one is your personal favorite?
Oh, my personal favorite used to be Cursor because I am a
Mm,
software engineer. So it makes it a lot easier for me to, let's say, for example, if I want to debug something in like large code base or something,
mm,
or if I'm trying to create an application from like scratch where I want to develop the backend and all that, and I know the set of technologies and all. So it was like a one-stop shop for me. But of late I have been using a lot of Lovable as well because you get noticing like it's not a single tool that does everything for you.
yeah.
So you start with Lovable, describe your idea, it builds like a nice UI and everything, like the entire full stack application, right? Your front
Mhm.
end, your back end and all that. And then let's say I want to implement certain features, I push that into Git and then get it into like Cursor or some other IDE, right? It makes it easier in terms of implementation, but getting the starter template from something like Lovable or Replit saves a lot of time for someone who is not like an expert in front end or like who doesn't know. There's like a lot, very few full stack engineers who can do end to end, but Lovable or Replit are able to do that. And there are also like a lot of other tools that are able to develop just mobile apps as well, right? So
Mhm.
if you are trying to develop like a mobile app, there are, I forget the name, but um, I think yeah, I'm blanking out, but there are a lot of tools. If you search for it, there are tools. Their main focus is just developing mobile apps, right? Whether it's Android or iOS apps, and you're able to do
Mhm.
that. I mean, like it's not that you can't do it with something like Cursor or anything, but it makes these specific tools that are specific to one particular area makes it even more easier, rather than you specifically going and making sure, hey, this is a mobile app. I want you to do X, Y, Z, and ABC sort of things, but it does everything for you on the back end.
Yeah, that's very right. I know the folks who use Lovable, they also end up using Bolt. Bolt is also very popular, and with Bolt, you can actually go ahead and create mobile apps, and they use Expo framework to
Mhm,
do it. And Akhilesh, one thing, since we are streaming, we're gonna put it on C Sharp TV and Global AI.
mhm,
One thing that people are finding it really tough, especially from C Sharp and .NET developers, or maybe Java, right? With all these vibe tools, they end up creating these JavaScript applications, right? So is there any tool? I cannot think of any tool like Lovable that would create maybe like Python based application, or maybe C Sharp .NET, or maybe Java based
Mhm.
application, right? So that's one thing, is a gap. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think so. All these large language models were trained on a lot of open source code bases that are available on the
Mm,
internet, right? And if we look at that, a lot of the open source code bases are either written in Java or Python, right? So that is a problem, like because the model was not trained on a lot of these sort of, maybe it was trained on the syntax and semantics and all that
mm,
based on the books or available documentation and all that. But so at least in my personal experience, I have noticed that it is able to generate good code for like Python and Java compared to like
mhm,
other programming languages, because again it was trained on all that. And a lot of times what I have noticed works for me is like, pick a popular tech stack, right? You don't need to pick something like the best popular, like for example, if you're trying to develop like the front end, right? You don't need to pick like the best possible thing that does like a lot of animations and all that. Pick something that has been like time tested, like for example React framework, something like that, and people have been using it in the industry for a few years, right? So, and explicitly mention it in your initial prompt that, hey, for my backend I want you to use this database, this thing and all that. Do some research, use tools like ChatGPT or Gemini to do some deep research, figure out like what are the some of the most common frameworks that are being used for front end if I want to develop some application like that, and explicitly tell it to start with that. If it needs to look up the documentation, tell it that, hey, go to the web, search for the documentation on that. If you can't find it, tell me, I'll tell you where to go and look at. So we can just talk, just like imagine like you have like a junior engineer who is working with you, right? The way to look at it is like you have like an intern or an engineer who is there with you, and you are guiding him along the process. You are not letting him loose to do whatever he wants to do, right? So that's the way to look at it, is my personal opinion.
very well said, Akhilesh. I'm following everything that you are saying. And thank you so much, Akhilesh, for sharing your pearls of wisdom with us. We'll have to wrap up this show, right? We are at 37th minute. Any final thing, Akhilesh, you want to plug in before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think so one final thought that I wanted to put in people is, so a lot of times we go to this decision paralysis where
Hmm.
hey, there are a lot of tools, there is one new AI tool coming every day, right? So should I pick this, should I pick that, will this solve my problem, will that solve my problem? I think that goes into the decision paralysis, which sometimes even I go into, right? Like, just pick one, see, try it out, right? It doesn't have to be, because this is not like a month long process where you're trying to develop something. So it's like probably an hour or maybe days long process or maximum week long thing, right? So spend some time, figure out what is it that works for you, what is it that doesn't work for you. Pick a tool, right? It doesn't have to be the best or anything. Maybe you really liked Lovable's UI, right? Or maybe you really liked Clearplates. You don't worry about people talking about, hey, maybe I had success with Lovable, this did something great, this did something not great. So it doesn't matter, right? Pick something that you like, implement an application right from scratch, right? From everything from end to end, and you will have the confidence, and then you can go and play around with different things. So that's my closing thought for people who want to try it.
That's very good. Thank you so much. So, the moral of the story is go ahead and try the tools out there, right? Get feedback from the others, but first try it firsthand and see
Yeah.
whatever works for you, right? So,
Yes, get
Akhilesh,
some
thank you.
hands-on thing, right? Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So, Akhilesh, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you so much everyone for joining this episode. This was in this AI Dev Tools today, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye bye.
Yeah, thank you so much.